folks, we're going to go ahead and start. It is 10 o'clock by my clock. So we are going to go ahead and start. Thank you all so much for being here today. This is Mary Kelly, and I am joined with the amazing, incredible Colonel Lee Ellis. So if you don't know Lee Ellis, I'm a shameless fan. I was starstruck when I met him at an event. He, along with Admiral Stockdale and Captain Charlie Plum and Jerry Coffey and a bunch of other folks, were guests of the Vietnamese in various POW camps during the Vietnam War. And his latest book is called Leadership Behavior DNA. And it's always a little bit hard for me to say when somebody else writes a leadership book and I look at it and I just think, oh gosh, mine are not as good as they should be. So thank you for that, sir, for making me work a little bit harder on my next one. But if you don't have his latest book, shameless plug for Lee Ellis. And I want to go ahead and start screen sharing because we want to talk about the very important issue of being resilient in today's society. And in today's society, we've, in the past 6-7 months with COVID and several other challenges, many people have struggled with bouncing back, with dealing with challenges, day-to-day challenges. And, I was thinking about it this morning. I thought, wait a second. People are complaining because they're sleeping in their own bed. They have plenty of food to eat. Nobody is being horrible to them like, Lee, what you folks experienced. But we know that resilience deals with not only the unknown, which is very difficult, but everything else that goes along with challenges and being resilient. So I kind of think resilience is the ability for us to absorb stress. We can't get rid of all stress. We have to be functional. We have to react appropriately. And that means not overreacting, not reacting, making the right decisions at the right time, adapting to changing circumstances, and thriving. So Lee, am I anywhere close to your definition of resilience?
Yes, you are. I really take it into such a personal, psychological perspective, a little bit more. You're kind of the practical perspective. I take it and look at it a little bit more about believing in yourself, having that confidence, but also focusing on your duty and not letting up on your duty and taking responsible for everything you're supposed to be doing during those difficult times. And that kind of keeps you in a positive framework. It gives you something to do. The old saying about the idle mind is a devil's workshop. We have to keep our focus on the things that we need to be focused on.
I think you are absolutely right. And right now, this is really tough in the business environment today. And we've all seen this. We've seen restaurants closing when they couldn't get patrons in. We've seen small businesses, large businesses closing. The Dow Jones just shifted who's going to be in the Dow Jones Industrial Average this morning. There's just a lot of change. And from my perspective, I view a lot of change, even when it's negative, as an opportunity for forced acceleration. So we know that things are more unpredictable. We know that change is happening even faster. We know that technology and technical solutions and evolutions are happening, and we've got to get out ahead of them as leaders, as well as in our businesses. We know that we're more globally interconnected. You and I both had a book come out this year, and the printing of my hardcover book, the Who Comes Next book on leadership succession, was delayed because the glue for the binding was stuck in a supply chain, sitting on a ship somewhere, because it couldn't pull into port. We're more globally interconnected, and that means a reliance on other people. And it means that we're having to adapt in ways that maybe before we didn't necessarily have to do. And I wanted to kind of ask you a little bit about what that looks like in, not just in the business world, but also in our adaptability. And we know that anything that's going to require people to get together is going to have to shift. We know that we've got to be more resilient, and we've got to have backups to backups to backups. And this is especially where I wanted to ask you to jump on in with your thoughts on, what can leaders do in terms of organization. I want to get into the personal aspect that you are the master of, but in terms of creating more resilient organizations, what I've been telling my business is is to make sure that you've got redundancies. Make sure that when you've got an internal shock and an external shock, like the virus and some, unrest in cities and things like that, that we've got redundancies in place. So backups to backups. So for you, Lee, what kind of backups do you think businesses need to have right now?
Well, I think first of all is thinking through where the chances of failures might come, and that's where you want your backups. As a flyer, we always have to have a backup plan, and sometimes a backup to the backup. The weather goes bad, somebody crashes on the runway closes. So you look at those places where you're most vulnerable, and that's where you want your backups. The other thing I think, of course, is you always need to be thinking about your people and what's happening with them, because they are the ones that actually do the work, and that you want them to feel free enough to be thinking ahead also in the realm that they're responsible for. So I think as a leader, one of the most important things I ever learned to do, and it's not normal for me, I'm an extrovert, but I learned to sit down and think. And the way I had to learn to sit down and think was I have a whiteboard or a picture board back in the old days, and I had all my direct reports picture on that board, and I would sit down and think about everything that was going on in their area. And that helped me so much to stay out in front. And then I would ask them questions that would help them stay ahead in their area by thinking things through. So that's kind of the way I would approach it.
I love that. My 5 points on resiliency are these 5 things that deal with business organizations. And this is exactly what you're talking about. We have to sit down and think about the what ifs. So what I ask people to do is I say, so what is the best possible case scenario? What if everything was sunshine, rainbows, sparkles, and unicorns? What if everything was fantastic? And then what is the absolute worst case scenario? And then we plan for those 2 extremes, realizing that reality is probably somewhere in the middle, but thinking that through is huge. Now, in the military, we know that we have to be training for our next replacement, always, always, always. And part of our mentality is to make sure the people who come after us are well prepared to do that job. We have generally a turnover binder. The Army calls it something slightly different, but a turnover book where you help your people and the people who come after you be really successful. And what a lot of civilian businesses don't realize that in the military, you're only assigned someplace for 2 to 3 years, which means that your people, your talent is turning over 33 to 50% every single year. So we have to make sure that we keep our people current, we give them the tools they need to be successful, and we stay ahead of things. Where do you see resiliency popping into succession planning?
I think it's like everything else. You have to be looking ahead and thinking about who are we, what are our values, what is our mission, and then who are the people who can take that forward. Who are we? What are our values? What's our mission? And how can we move forward? And then you have to develop those people. Of course, I've been working with companies for many, many years with their high potentials, helping them to develop to move up. And so you're really going to have to invest some money to develop and have succession within your own company. And of course, the other piece of that some of my clients are looking at right now is retention of their top talent. For instance, in the mortgage industry, they're very concerned that another company is going to take off and pull their best people away. So they're saying, how can we make sure that we value our people? We have a people culture that is so strong that people know that they're cared about here, they have a future here, and they'll want to stay with us.
That's exactly right. And we have to not only attract and retain that great talent by doing what we do best, but we have to actively promote our people. In your book on page 283, shameless plug, I love the fact that you incorporate an honor code. At all the academies, of course, we have an honor code. The military has an honor code. But I love the fact that you map this out as a code that also are behaviors. And you say things like, tell the truth even when it's difficult, treat others with dignity and respect. If everybody did that, we wouldn't have half the problems we have in the world today. Keep your word and your commitments. Boom. Be ethical. That sounds so basic, but a lot of people weren't raised to know what that looks like. Number 5, act responsibly, do your duty, and be accountable. Boom. There's entire day-long conferences that just deal with that in point number 5. Number 6 is be courageous. And I'm excited to hear a little bit more about some of the people who influenced you during a time that was very tough. And then number 7 is to be that person who lives your values. Be faithful to your core and your conscience and your deepest intuitions. And I think this is all part of organizations that people want to be part of. People want to be part of organizations that have that honor code. And as we get into the adaptability of what resiliency means, and then we get into the reality, how do people, and this is my last point, and then I want to turn it over to you for your slide deck, is how do people incorporate, say, your 7 points in your honor code with the reality that is their organization, especially when things are tough?
Yeah. You know where it starts? Like everything else, it starts with the leader, because the leader sets the pace. The leader sets the example. I'm going to show you and talk a little about those in the POW camps in a second. But the thing that was so amazing and the thing that I learned was that leaders have to be genuine. You can't pretend. When you pretend, people see right through it. And that loses their confidence in you. They lose their trust. They lose their respect. They know that you're insecure when you pretend. So when you make a mistake, when you violate your integrity in a small way and you try to cover it up, they're going to see it. And what you have to do is take ownership. Hey guys, I messed up. And correct back to course quickly before you get too far off course. You know, as another aviation example, you know, when you get off course, you better get back home quick or pretty soon you'll be way off course. And that's not a good place to be. So being genuine is so important. And the leader has that responsibility to create a culture where people, all those 7 core issues of leading with honor, we call them the honor code, you have to work to live to those. Though you cannot assume those, you cannot pretend those, they are hard. I battle every day to live those. And some days I fall short and I just have to take ownership and recover, apologize if need be, and then get back on course.
I love that. And I think you're absolutely right. Is it something that we do struggle with every single day? And we know that great leaders do exactly what you said. Get up every morning, look at that list and say, am I doing my very best in each one of these 7 behaviors to hold up that honor code? And we know that great leaders are resilient. They know that they've got to be the person who is leading the charge to make sure that things are being course corrected. And it's tough. You know, it's easy to be a leader if you don't do any of this stuff. It's easy to be a leader who just warms the chair and collects a paycheck. And that is not our definition of a leader. So Lee, what I would love to do is turn the screen sharing over to you if you don't mind sharing yours. And what I want to do also is I love that in your book, you also give people the opportunity to download certain things. So in the chat, I'm going to go ahead and put where people can get a copy of your Appendix B, the honor code, those 7 points, so that people can download that from your site, if that's okay, while you are sharing your screen with us. You know, you started with this idea of the leading with honor several years ago, and I would just like to turn it over to you.
Okay. Tell me what do you see on your screen now? I want to make sure.
It's perfect. I see your resilience mindset leading with honor slide. That's perfect.
Okay, good. Okay. So I want to just share a little bit about this mindset of resilience, because for me, it is a mindset. And it's set in me because I had some amazing leaders. That's Colonel Robbie Reisner, later General Reisner after the war. He was a Korean War hero, was a squadron commander, was a senior ranking officer in the POW group for many years. He got there over 2 years prior to me, a prisoner of war for 7.5 years, captured at age 40, spent more than 4 years in solitary confinement, was beaten and brutalized many times, and yet he was always genuine. He always bounced back. I actually had contact with him when he was in solitary confinement once, and he said, Lee, you know, I've just been 10 months in total darkness. And he said, my mind is going crazy. But he kept bouncing back, and he had bounced back that time, and he gave me some ideas on what was expected. He clarified what was expected, but he said, if you ever hear that I've done or said something that does not sound like the honor code, said, know that I've been tortured longer than I could take it, and I've done my best, and just forgive me because I've done my best. He was so genuine and so open about it, because we all went through that. We were all tortured, at 95% of us were, and they could make you do something and they wouldn't let you die. So I came to understand what he was talking about. And then we had another guy there, a great one, Commander Stockdale. He was there 7.5 years also. The MOH up there stands for Medal of Honor. Naval Academy graduate and a great leader, also in solitary confinement for more than 4 years. The Medal of Honor was for his courageous resistance. All three of these guys should have had that. But their example, again, of bouncing back, and oh gosh, it was amazing how great these guys were. Now, I want to point out here, I want to back up one slide. So Reisner was married 29 years to his first wife. When he came home, that did not work out. And then he remarried an MIA wife who waited for her husband. He didn't come home, and was married 36 years and died at age 89, okay? Now think about what he's gone through. You talk about resilience. Stockdale died early. He was married 58 years to Sybil. He died early at 82 with Alzheimer's. And then Commander Denton, the other third of our trifecta of great leaders there that were there 7.5 years, captured at age 41, solitary more than 4 years, married 61 years, and then married 4 years to the second wife, died at around just over 90 years old. So the amazing thing was how these guys survived, and they came home and did so well after that, all of those 7.5 years. So we know that the human body, the human mind is capable of doing that. They were great role models for me as a young officer. I just turned 24 years old when I was captured, and to have those kind of role models for you, it makes all the difference in the world, because when times are tough, people are looking to their leader to see how the leader responds to determine what's expected of them and what's possible for them to do. And quite often we find that we can do a great deal better than we thought we could, because we see somebody else do it and we say, if they can do it, I probably can do it. And we go along and make it. So great guys, great role models. And I just feel so blessed to have him early in my life. Resilience really sustained the POWs. This is a 6.5 by 7 foot cell. I was in a 6.5 by 7 foot cell my first 9 months in the Hanoi Hilton, and with 3 other guys. It was 6 inches wider than my arms when I stretch them out, and a foot deeper than my arms going that way. But 9 months of being locked up, the only time we were out of there was to pick up our bowl of soup and rice twice a day, or a loaf of bread twice a day, and to empty our bucket. It was the size of a bathroom, but our bathroom was a 3-gallon bucket, and thank goodness it had a lid. We got to empty it every morning. Or if you went out, if you're going to go to interrogation and possibly be tortured, every now and then that happened too. So the resilience that was there was amazing to us. Before we came home, when things got better after the torture stopped a couple of years just before we came home, after about 3 years, we talked about going home, and people are going to think we're going to be crazy. They know we've been through a lot, but they won't know what to expect. But what we talked about was how amazed we were that our minds and our mental health, or even our physical health, was so good. We were much better than we would have ever anticipated after being there all those years. So the body, the mind is much more resilient, but it needs to be connected with people. And this is an important point for right now. You've got to stay connected with your people, because people can get down on themselves when they're going through hard times, or things are different than what they've been accustomed to. So you got to really let them know they're important, they're valued, that you're not forgetting about them, and that we're all in this together. We are a team. And the POWs, we really fought as a team to stay connected. We'd risk our lives to get that person in solitary confinement. So how do you get resilience? I think it's a mindset. I think it's important. Our mindsets come through our culture, our values, experience, knowledge, training. They give us a mindset about the world we're in and about ourselves. And that drives our attitude, which drives our behaviors and choices, which determine the outcomes that can be positive or negative. So it really, so much goes back just really to your attitude and your perspective, your mindset. Now, it's really important to stay positive, to believe in yourself. Here's a couple of quotes from POWs. Amazing. This guy, Red McDaniel, was beaten for 15 straight days with a big piece of rubber like a fan belt. Beaten 15 straight days. He was there 6 years. He came home. He's 88 years old or 89 now, living a great life. All I had was tomorrow, and that was a height of optimism. Well, then I would make tomorrow count for something, and on that I finally found sleep. One of my cellmates, Marine Corps First Lieutenant Jim Warner, many days he would look over at me, and my real name is Leon, I go by Lee. My dad's name was Leon. He'd say, Leon, tomorrow is another day. And that means we made it through this one, we got another one to look forward to. So you got to stay positive. Commander Stockdale, in his book, Good to Great, Jim Collins talks about his experience and knowledge with Admiral Stockdale, who served at Stanford at the Hoover Institute after he came home, and many years later, he was an admiral. And he got to know Jim Collins and Stockdale were close friends. They used to walk together. And in his book, Good to Great, Stockdale talks about, Collins talks about the Stockdale paradox. You must not confuse the fact that you will prevail, believing you're going to prevail, with the discipline to confront the most brutal facts of your current reality, whatever they might be. And we all lived this. We didn't know this at the time, but we just knew we had to deal with the brutal realities, but we also had to believe someday we're going home. You know, Viktor Frankl was in the Holocaust. He was a psychiatrist when he was captured. He lost his wife and both his parents in the Holocaust. And he said everything can be taken away from a man or woman, but one thing: the last of human freedoms is to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. And that is so true and so important. In the Korean War, a lot of the young kids just sat down and died because they decided they were going to die, and they just sat down and died. Fortunately, we had great leadership that helped us have a good attitude and make good choices. Confucius said, our greatest glory is not in never failing or falling, but in rising every time we fall. And then the Japanese proverb, fall 7 times and stand up 8. You can't quit. Mm-hmm. So it's so important. And I think this is the last one. Michael Jordan missed 9,000 shots in his career, lost over 300 games. 26 times he missed the winning shot at the end of the game. He says, I've failed over and over again in my life, and that's precisely why I succeed. We learn more in suffering than we do in success. Mm. And when we suffer through failures and bounce back, we come back stronger, better. There's a quote I love from The Return of the King. There's no freedom without sacrifice. There's no glory without loss. There's no victory without loss, and there's no glory without suffering. The people who have suffered and come through it know they come out better the other side. At the POW's 40th anniversary of freedom, the 40th anniversary of our release in 2013, we had a reunion. We're sitting around a big round table, there are about 8 or 10 of us sitting there having a drink, reminiscing. And one of the guys said, you know, guys, I'd never volunteer to be a POW, but I wouldn't change a thing.
That's amazing to me.
Every person at that table agreed. Yes, we agree. We're better men for it. So suffering, don't volunteer to suffer, but when it's going on, know that when you get through it and come out the other side, if you live by your code of honor, by the way, if you live by the code of honor, you come out the other side, you're going to be a better person. And that's what we tried to do. So I think for leaders to set the example of resilience, it's really about believing in yourself. Even with all your foibles, you got to believe in yourself. You got to stay positive. You have to live in that paradox of confronting the brutal realities, but expecting long-term success. you have to do your duty. That's your responsibility. You have to have ownership. And especially as a leader, because you're not just doing your job, you're leading and influencing. You're influencing everyone else. And you got to stay connected. Now, when we talked about the code of honor a little bit while ago, occasionally I find myself struggling with an issue that I think, I'm wondering if I'm really, I don't want to be tempted. You know, when our personal money or reputation is on the line, it's easy to get tempted. And so I have a situation I'm dealing with right now that I'm not sure how to handle it legally, ethically, all of that. There's some options there, and I'm not sure which ones might be ethical and which ones are not, because they might be, I just don't know. And I've already decided I need to get some counsel from somebody that I know is trustworthy, who has strong values, but also has knowledge of the areas that can help me walk through this. So when I come out the other side, I've got my honor with me, and I'll take what I have to take. If it may be suffering financially, I'll take what I have to take to get to the other side, because I want to do it in an honorable way. And then we have to bounce back. We always know we got to get back up off the canvas, so to speak. That's what they call it in boxing, and bounce back up, get back in the fight, and carry on. But especially as a leader, they're watching how you bounce back. You know, Stockdale, Rosner, Denton, oh my gosh, they went down many times. They were knocked down and knocked out and beaten, tortured, but they kept getting back up, and they kept getting back up. And when you see your leader do that, you want to live up to that kind of example also. So that's kind of a quick rehash of what my life was like in resilience. And I'd love to have some questions or share some more about that with you.
Wonderful. Yeah. We will cheerfully take questions in the chat, folks. So if you've got a question for Colonel Ellis, I could just sit here and talk to you all day long, Lee. I find your story so inspirational, and your personal commitment, especially when you got back, on the adjustment and then looking around. And, you know, my husband was a Vietnam vet as well and didn't go through anything like what you did, but he was treated quite badly when he got back too. And so sometimes my leaders say, well, nobody knows what I do, nobody appreciates me. And you've certainly experienced that firsthand.
Yeah, we all experience that tough times. And I think what quite often we don't realize is that other people do. There are people watching us. There's always somebody watching you. I don't care if you're the lowest person in the room or in the organization. You know, one of the most amazing things when we came home, and not many people know this, was I'd been home 6 months. I just got back into flying and was requalifying, just finished up my requalification, about to become an instructor pilot, actually. And I went home for Thanksgiving of 1973. I came home in March 73, or the end of the war. And I got a call on Friday after Thanksgiving from a colonel friend of mine who'd been a POW 5.5 years like me. And he said, Lee, this is confidential, but I was on the Major's promotion board, and we promoted 5 or 6 of you guys, our guys who were POWs, who were captains. We promoted them early to Major. I was promoted 2 years early to Major, and I was like, you know, I just pinned on my captains a few months ago because I was frozen in the POW camp. I was shocked, but you know, nothing fazed me at the time. But my first thought was, how am I going to do that? I'm just learning how to be a captain, and now I got to be a major. And so I asked some of my peers over the next year or two. I asked some of my peers, how did I get promoted to major? I did nothing, you know, sparkling, or so many people did more than I did, I thought. He said, you had a lot of influence. Mm-hmm. Here I am, I'm usually the youngest guy in the room, the junior ranking guy in the room, and here's this guy who is 12 years older than me. By the way, he's 89 now, this friend of mine. And he said, you had a lot of influence. And a couple others told me the same thing. So I've always remembered that people that you may not think you're influencing people, but you probably are. To go with that, as a leader, I definitely allow young people to influence me, or any more inexperienced. If there's something going on and they seem to know a lot about it, then I want to hear what they have to say. And I may jump on it and say, this is a great idea, let's do it. Or I may say, well, that's a good idea, but I don't think we can do that right now. But being willing to be influenced by others is an important part of leadership too, I think.
Wow. I think that's really critical, where you say that sometimes we don't realize the influence we have over other people, and that our job as leaders is to be both inspirational and influential in the best possible way. And then the other part of that is people are watching. People are always watching, and they will cue off of us. You know, when we train SEAL teams and PJs and Army Rangers and Delta Force and Force Recon guys, we do say, you know, calm is contagious, and that your attitude, your behavior, and how it's manifested has far-reaching effects on other people. And what I found interesting in researching, you know, your story and the other POWs was how many of you stayed in the service,
Mm-hmm.
and how you all, most of you stayed for a full career, if not more.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we were dedicated, and you know that camaraderie is very strong. It's hard to walk away from that for most of us. And the military opened arms and brought us back in and gave us a push and didn't penalize us. They gave us an opportunity, and that was all we wanted, was the opportunity to get back in and go to work and compete. And you see, we were most of us were much more ambitious than you would have thought, because when you're locked up in a room with no TV, no job, we had a job, but it was communicating or resisting the enemy, but there was a lot of time just sitting there. And so we had a lot of time to think about all the things we wanted to do, wanted to accomplish. And the enemy was always trying to destroy our self-respect, our self-worth. Because if they could wipe out our self-worth, then we'd be willing probably to do whatever they want us to do. We'd be worthless. But we fought to keep our feeling of worth and value. And so when we came home, we were ready to go prove ourselves and jump in and get to work.
Yeah, it's really motivational. And again, to follow each one of you and the message that you share, especially in today's world, on how to be resilient and how to face adversity with grace and dignity and respect, and to build up the people around you. I think those are lessons for today. And I know we're out of time, but oh my gosh, I could just listen to you talk all day long, Lee, and I'm a wild fan. So anything else you'd like to add before I make yet another shameless plug for your book?
I would just mention, aside from the book, I do monthly coaching. So it's just like you do, I think. We both do. So obviously go to Mary's first, and then you can come check out mine. It's a 5-minute coaching, and I do a blog every month. But I think right now the most important thing is going back to the honor code. I'm so glad you brought that up. We have to take ownership for who we are, because right now their culture is trying to move toward the end justifies the means mentality. You can't go there. We cannot go there, because that's where the communists, they justified everything. But that, in fact, they even told us truth is that which most benefits the party. And the frightening thing is that mentality is growing in our country. And leaders, if leaders of honor don't put a stop to that and provide and live by accountability, it's going to be an unfortunate future.
I think you're absolutely right. Lee, what is your website? What's the best place for people to find you?
Leadingwithhonor.com.
Leadingwithhonor.com. Also the name of your first book. And then this is your latest book, again, Leadership Behavior DNA. I love it. I buy it for other people. And thank you so much. Lee, I can't thank you enough for being on the program today. Everyone, you will get the recording of this. I'm excited about this. And we will see you again next time. Colonel Ellis, it's my honor, sir. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Mary. Great to be with you and great to see you again.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.